your family. iWill Advisor specializes in every aspect of Medicare and what options are most likely to help or hurt you. And that way you can get a plan that fits your lifestyle and needs at an affordable rate. Call Debbie at 954-753-8080. 954-753-8080.
Now you can get Talk 1470 WNN on 95.3 FM too. Loud and clear. Health and Wealth Radio, WNN.
The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. It's Monday night at 9. Time for Sex Talk with Dr. Richard Siegel, a certified sex therapist and sexuality educator. Dr. Siegel is here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality that you might not have known who to ask. He'll also welcome special guests to talk about a wide variety of topics within the fascinating world of sexuality. So, welcome to Sex Talk.
Good evening. Welcome back. Monday night. My name is Ricky Siegel, and it's my pleasure to be with you again on Sex Talk with Dr. Richard Siegel, with my favorite guest, my brother, sexologist extraordinaire, Larry Siegel.
Great to be here with you.
Welcome back. Thanks for coming. I know it's a much longer commute, an extra mile.
Yeah.
So as I posted on Facebook today, we're continuing now. We feel like we're on a roll. This ongoing conversation of shit that pisses us off. I don't think, I can't see Ken, the engineer, from this side. I don't know if we can say shit on this hour. Did that? No. Yeah, see, the rules changed, right? It was Dennis France when he showed his ass and said shit on TV back in the 90s, right? No, we can't say that, right? So, same rules.
Yeah.
The history of comedy on CNN this week included George Carlin, and I swear I wrote these notes before that was on, but they showed the bit about his 7 dirty words that you can't say on TV and on the radio, and how crazy it is that was a comedy bit that basically turned into the law.
Right.
Right? People just assumed that was FCC law. Those were the 7 dirty words that you can't say.
Mm-hmm.
And how much that relates to sexuality and the messages about sex ed, the messages we get about language, the words that we grow up with, like pee and pee-pee and wee-wee, that if we can't even talk about our bodies,
sure,
and that the language is so censored that words about sexuality are censored because they're dirty words and naughty, and people have to just dance around because, well, you see how it relates.
Yeah.
So we have to say pee and poo and coitus.
All of those euphemisms.
Right? Right, you could call someone a fellator on television, but you can't call you can't certainly say a more slang word for a particular sex act.
Mm-hmm.
When Mike Myers did that goofy James Bond character, remember, it was in the ads all over television during the day whenever, hey, shag me, baby.
Right.
Like nobody knew what that word was because it was British. But you can't say, the granddaddy of all the cuss words.
Sure, but see,
people's heads will explode.
Isn't that the ridiculousness of that game? Because even in censoring it, you'll have a word like F space space space, like we don't know what the word is,
right.
Or they'll say it and we see them saying it,
hyphens.
Right, and they'll just maybe sort of bleep that out, like we don't know what they're saying. I mean, you and I have both done exercises in some of our classes where, we go through all of that to show the discomfort that we have, right? How many nicknames do people have for penis? How many nicknames do people have for vagina? How many nicknames do people have for forehead?
Right.
Right? How many nicknames do they have for chin?
Right.
Or knee? And we look at, how we refer to any non-sexual part of the body, we're okay with that. But when it comes to anything that is related to sex or sexuality, that's where we have to get ourselves as far away as possible.
So we have a culture that is so humiliated, so embarrassed of our very selves, our very bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's a big shock and big surprise that we are so sexually unhealthy that we lead the world in an inability to get a handle on basic health aspects, like we end up talking about every week, right? The thing, the most unsexy aspect of a show about sex is how sexually unhealthy we continue to be.
Sure.
We've been fighting this fight for going on 30 years, and we haven't improved. Either we suck at it, or we just haven't been in front of enough people, right?
I think there's a few things at work, and part of it is, I think some of our own success really kind of does us in, because there is certainly far more exposure that people have to sex and sexuality and sexual images than ever before. And how often do we hear, again, adults, educators, therapists, referring to younger kids today that, oh, they know so much more than we did at their age. And I take great issue with that.
Yeah.
We confuse being exposed to things and knowing
things.
And
Because
they're
there's still no
exposed to-
sex ed.
Right. They're exposed to way more stuff than ever before, certainly. But there's no substance behind it. They don't know what it means. They don't know what it's about. You still have girls in their late teens and women, adult women, who don't know where their clitoris is.
Or what it is.
Or what it is, right?
Or what it's made of, or the anatomy. I mean, I keep a file in my desk, in my office, of Xerox sheets of clitoral anatomy. And constantly, both of us are baffled at how many, granted, we do this for a living, so we should, know our way around, but we should not know, on principle, more about a woman's body than a woman.
Right.
And so many women just have they've never even seen a picture or have gotten the message that, they have no business down there, and it goes right back to the same,
Absolutely.
the same craziness. How many times have we heard, if a girl knows the word clitoris, why do you know that? Who's taught you
Well,
that?
if she's a young girl,
Right.
she must be
Like,
abused.
maybe she must be being victimized because someone's teaching her something inappropriate.
Right. And we talk to adolescent girls in particular. How many times do we ask girls, have you ever seen or touched your cervix? Have you ever reached into your vagina and touched your cervix? And the overwhelming response is, ew, that's nasty.
Yeah.
Right? Yet, I'll spare any kind of, visual and posing, positioning, things like that. Yet, touching their own body is disgusting, yet anybody else is free to go in there however they want. Right?
Yeah.
That
and
disconnect.
ask if they've ever looked at a partner before intercourse. Ew, no. Like, oh, okay. Looking at it is a gross thought, but unprotected intercourse is not.
Right.
Yeah. And
So-
another battle we've been
So it
fighting for
really
years.
is it a surprise,
Yeah.
given how we are so personally not only inhibited but afraid of sex and sexuality, that when we look at the reactions against porn, where everything we're trying to avoid is now right out there in the open, right in your face. And I think that's really where a lot of the reaction does come from. Because this is nothing new. Right? It really isn't. I mean, we know that there are hieroglyphs that are sort of early porn. There are cave drawings that basically are early porn. And you think there are people back then that were complaining about guys spending too much time in the cave with their rocks?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah. If you're listening on the radio on 1470 AM or 95.3 FM in South Florida, give us a call. Join the conversation. We're at 888-565-1470. Or you could find us on Facebook, Sex Talk with Dr. Richard Siegel, and send an email. And we'll try and answer it if I notice.
Yeah, we'd really love to hear from you.
Yeah. So we continue on with poopy things that irritate us. I'll couch my words very carefully. Refer to a reference to mother-son incest that rhymes with brother trucker. No, it's a silly game that we play. It really is. And it's like we were saying last week, it spills over into our professions, where people who are supposed to be reliable as clinicians, with the assumption, remember we talked about that three-way contract between the state and the professional and the public to assure competence and training and we would hope comfort to be able to offer psychotherapy, counseling, support to people. That's kind of audacious, right? We talk about this in ethics classes. The word professional comes from the verb to profess, which is basically like standing on top of the table and telling, hey, everybody, I got this thing.
Yeah.
Come pay me money.
Yeah.
And, a card from the state that proves I'm competent to take your money for the service that one would hope is medically accurate and training and credentialed and comprehensive. But where else, in any area of medicine, of education, where else do you have politicians fighting and arguing that curricula must be medically accurate? And how does a politician...
And opposing that.
Right. How do you oppose that? How do you stand up and say, no, I insist that sex ed not be medically accurate, because then we lose our ability to lie and pull all this crap and tell girls if they have an abortion, they'll get breast cancer or crazy things.
Yeah,
right?
and I think that
no
alone...
other area.
No, and that alone is more telling than I think we've ever really acknowledged. Because, that sense of, no, we will not insist that the information we give to kids is accurate, is correct.
Try that in the cardiology curriculum.
Right. No. Yeah, no, forget everything you think you know about the heart. Just go by what I want to think and what's more comfortable for me.
Right. Well, Stephen Colbert will forever be memorialized for giving us the word truthiness.
Yeah, it was really a great addition to the lexicon.
It's a brilliant word.
Yeah.
It has to feel true.
Yeah.
That's more important.
And that's so much around. I mean, people even say that now. That's now kind of a criterion that you don't even have to be accurate as long as you sound like you know what you're talking about.
Well, impressive. He sounds good. He must know what he's talking about. And sadly, it's spilled over into the counseling professions, as we were talking about, when the training is just not there. So if someone is struggling and dealing with any kind of sexual issue, who do they turn to? I guess people's first impulse would probably be to ask their medical provider. And the family physician, well, they know their kids, so maybe that's not, well, the go-to would be the gynecologist for women and the urologist for men. Right? Not that women don't have urological needs the same as men, but...
Right, they're a urogynecologist.
But they're the go-to pee-pee doctors.
Right.
And gynecologists are the go-to down-there doctors for women. And so if they ask about a sexual problem, again, with the hope that the licensed clinician whose area is down there would know a thing or two about what those down-there parts are used for, no.
But we know from experience that is not the case.
No training.
First of all, we know that most physicians are trying to get out of the room before a question like that can even come up.
Right.
We refer to that as the door handle confession.
Right.
We've said many times to physicians that just because you're a great mechanic and you know how an engine works inside and out doesn't mean you know how to drive well.
Right.
And, we're often reminding these pee-pee doctors and foo-foo doctors that there are people that are attached to these genitals. And that's kind of a disconnect for most of them. So, you're absolutely right that there's this sort of inherent problem for a lot of people. If they do acknowledge that they have a problem, if they are interested in dealing with it and resolving it, and if the sort of normal go-to or typical go-to professionals aren't really the best choices, what should people do? How should people approach dealing with their sexual problems?
There you have it, right? We were stuck with this question of what percentage of all the psychotherapists in the country, all the
but that's
couples.
not rhetorical. I'm asking you that. What is it that we would tell people, given these natural obstacles?
Well, that these conversations need to happen. That obviously something we're far behind and need to kick into overdrive. This crash course. This educating providers. Doctors aren't getting it. Psychotherapists aren't getting it. Educators aren't getting it, and yet the problems continue. right? How do you offer someone a solution to problems decades in the making? And what do you do when they say, no, we don't want the solution because we're not comfortable with it. We don't like it. We don't want to have that conversation.
Right. Which, by the way, is also not empty rhetoric. That is something that we can see data on, particularly with older adults, that one of the primary reasons they don't ask their physicians about sex and sexuality is because they're afraid they would embarrass them. Now, how bad are things when that is the biggest obstacle for a lot of people?
The
that
patient
they won't
is
ask
worried
a
about
question.
embarrassing their
Right.
doctor.
Right.
That's
Right.
deplorable.
Right. And alongside that, too, there are a lot of, again, a large percentage of people that don't talk to their physicians because they get this vibe that the physician doesn't want to talk to.
Sure. And if the physician doesn't ask, then the conversation can't happen.
Right.
Right?
Right. So, we know that this stuff is out there and, this is a problem in the field with a lot of the professionals. So where does that leave the person who has a sexual problem? Right? If they're going to go pick up the phone and call somebody, where do they go? How do they know where to go?
Well, hopefully the thought of sex therapy continues to creep its way into the mainstream. Hopefully sexual medicine, instead of sex therapists throwing up their hands and complaining that sexual medicine is some kind of attempt to medicalize the field and do us in, right? We need to work with sexual medicine providers. A couple weeks ago we were talking about the Dream Team, getting folks on board to recognize that sex is part of all of these disciplines, and all of these disciplines need to work together. It needs to be in the schools. I haven't seen any change in all the years we've been here in Palm Beach and Broward counties, that the school district sex ed curriculum looks like some of the best in the business. And
Thank you.
I know. I remember those crazy school board meetings and carrying on till 2 o'clock in the morning, yelling and screaming. But when the dust finally settled, and the K through 12 curriculum was ensconced, it might as well be in one of those cement and glass things in the Smithsonian, because it doesn't happen in the schools.
Right.
There's no sex ed happening in the schools. There would be the one preachy abstinence programs that are there's still some of that money dangling
Sex,
from
respect, true love waits, all
Right.
that. And I'm sorry, and I will be opinionated about that and call those programs
got-
nonsense.
We got a microphone. We're allowed to be.
Yes.
I guess for this half hour, I guess
Yeah.
it's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
It is nonsense. But how's that sex education? Scaring kids, lying to kids, or preaching to kids, or telling them that there was one of those abstinence programs back in the day during the George W. Bush administration, when all that federal money was put up, all these matching funds, the states went running up with their empty pot for all this money for these abstinence only till marriage programs. And remember, there was that federal SPRANS funding and all of these criteria for what had to be taught. And there was one program that was called Not Me, Not Now. And I saw them at a conference, and something grabbed me about the title. And I said, for once, one of them doesn't seem so preachy, and so it seems a little bit more like they're trying to empower kids to make healthy decisions. Not me, not now. It didn't sound so until I got closer and saw there was a tagline under that, big letters, not me, not now, and then under it, what smart kids are saying to sex.
Right.
And I went storming up to the table, this woman there. I said, are you seriously telling kids that they're stupid if they're having sex? And her response, I'll never forget it. She said, oh, my boss just walked away from the table, but he has a really good line for that. Can you come back in a few minutes? I said, and that was 25 years ago.
Sure.
My kid was a baby. Now she's an adult, and nothing's changed.
And again, even broadening that out, how is it? And I've never quite understood this, and I've spent most of my life biting my tongue when I hear people say this. But why do people get bragging rights for remaining a virgin until they get married? I mean, why is that an asset? Why is that something to brag about? And we thought, oh, they're good, and we look at everybody else like, oh, gee,
Because it's virtuous. It's still that old stuff, that puritanical stuff, right? And I think, you were talking about this briefly earlier today, about how much of our sexual past is, well, a lot of what people think is religiosity and conservatism is really much more about ownership and property rights and ensuring lineage than it is about holiness or virtue, right? Were guys expected to be virgins? No. The onus was on women. And why? Why was it important that a girl, because, mostly in the old days, girls were married as girls.
Right.
Right? Why was it important that they be virgins?
Because they got more for that.
You mean?
They were worth more.
Like from her father?
Well, I mean, the husband that purchases her pays more if she's a virgin.
Well, also it'll have a lot to do with ensuring that the kids were his.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Didn't
there was
matter.
a lot of that was, I mean, in marriage and all those things that we, again, I think you're right. It's really, it's put in this context of religion and spirituality. It was all about legal and property issues. And yeah, it was about ensuring paternity.
Yeah. And I really do. I'm excited to have conversations with the ladies. I'm sorry I don't remember her name, who does the show right after hours about women's entrepreneurship, and I think we can have some great conversations because that's always been part of a missing piece of sexual health in any given group of people, in any culture, any society. The role of women, the place for women at the table. And the more women are seen as second class and to be possessed by husbands, and the more sexual health problems just continue rampant.
Absolutely. So, given that, would you say that, at least to some degree, that one of the reasons why we see that whole sex addiction, porn addiction industry, a lot of that abstinence-only stuff, all the whole aspect of what we do that does really piss us off, that a lot of that was able to flourish because the people who should be or should have been having these conversations, who should have been knowing and should have been advocating for this, didn't do it. And it basically just filled a vacuum of morality.
Of course. Sure.
Because I think, again, where does our moral template come from, especially sexually? Ours being American. We still live that legacy of the Puritans. And that's another thing. Most people don't really know who the Puritans are. Right? They know the Thanksgiving story and the Disney version and all of that, but these were not nice people.
Like the late Robin Williams said, these were people too uptight for England.
Right. Now, how uptight do you have to be too uptight for Great Britain in the 1500s? Right? Plus, ironically, do you know why they landed here? Just a little bit of trivia, but it kind of goes together. You talk about, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It was a beer run.
Oh, right. They ran out of rum or something,
ale.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So they were actually on their way to, I think, further south, like Virginia. But they ran out of beer. So they stopped off at, and I think it was Harvard, that was the big distillery.
Priorities.
And they just stayed.
So, where do people go? Couples have problems, and if they both retreat to their individual medical providers, they're not going to get very far.
Right.
So they go online and look for couples counselors or marriage and family therapists, right? And again, they don't understand. They assume that they'll be able to have a competent and fully trained person, and they run up against an institution that, again, by and large, avoids talking about sex. Psychologists rarely get trained. Marriage and family therapists rarely get trained. Counselors and social workers. Right? I remember in my counseling program, we had to vote as a class which elective we were going to get to choose, and it was between sex ed and a voc rehab class. And I had to seriously advocate. Everybody knew I was a sexuality educator in the class. And I was like, seriously, guys, really? You would rather take voc rehab than sex ed? Come on. It didn't matter that it was the least sexy. It was the most unsexy, medicalized, sterile sex ed class ever given. But it was still had to be better than voc rehab. I had to convince people to vote for the sex ed class. How is it that this gets missed, right?
Yeah. Well, I can see that, because we know that so many people on their wedding nights and really their first sexual experiences, they spend a lot of time talking about their job skills, and vocational interests.
Yeah. So again, we're running out of time. We got to keep. We got to plan this half hour better, because we wanted to talk about how this bleeds into. We got to commit to next week. We're going to talk about this, right?
Okay.
How these attitudes, this lack of training and information bleeds into how therapists deal with infidelity and cheating. Mm-hmm. Right? So we'll talk about that next week, right? Deal?
Deal.
You'll be back?
Deal.
I'll be back. Please, hopefully you come back, tune in. Write down the number, 888-565-1470. We got a couple more minutes.
Right. And maybe if this will sort of help, because we definitely would, especially for that one, would love people to call in and be a part of it. So maybe kind of as a preview, maybe if somebody gets a little reaction to this, I will say that because of all of this moralization that gets associated with sex and sexuality, we've never really looked at it as a life issue or biology or humanity. We look at it as this lens of some arbitrary morality. And I think the way most people do handle infidelity is just plain hypocritical. I'll throw in ignorant, but I'll focus on the hypocrisy of it.
Yeah.
Right? That these people, especially, they take their vows, right? For better or worse, till death do us part. What they really mean is, I'll stay with you until you piss me off.
Right.
Then I'm out of here.
Right.
The slightest little sense of betrayal, the slightest thing that you do that just angers me, I'm out of here.
And how do people know when they've broken the rules in a relationship? When they've broken the rules.
When they've broken the rules.
Right?
Because nobody talks about
how do they know
this.
what the rules are when they've broken them?
Right. Well, so, again, some people, they know they broke the rules, but they're still not quite sure what rule they broke.
They were never negotiated.
Right.
Right? So we can
Never
talk
negotiated, never talked about.
Talk about that idea of signing a blank contract.
Mm-hmm.
Which, aside from the pre-printed stuff that the justice of the peace or the rabbi or the minister or the imam reads in front of the friends and family, there's not a lot of negotiating going on.
Right. So we've got some work to do.
And we'll continue this next week. We'll talk about infidelity and cheating and affairs and sex therapy's response.
Know what the music means.
Thank you all. Have a good week.
You've been listening to Sex Talk with Dr. Richard Siegel. Join us every Monday night at 9 on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management,